Thanks so much for coming today. I'm Kim Madden from Advocates for Children, and joined today by Ross Baker and Liliana Diaz-Pedrosa. We're going to go through understanding the kindergarten IEP for children born in 2021. Okay, next slide. So the transition to kindergarten, all students who were born in 2021 have the right to a public school kindergarten seat in September of 2026. And there's two processes for families of children with disabilities. There's the kindergarten IEP, when you, as part of the team, will discuss the special education program and services that your child needs in kindergarten. And then there's also the kindergarten admissions process, so applying to the DOE schools. Next slide. So today's training, we're going to go through the introduction uh, and then legal rights, how to prepare for the IEP meeting, understanding the IEP meeting. We'll go through the different programs and services available, communication generally, and applying to kindergarten, and we'll close with some resources on this topic. Okay. Advocates for Children is an independent agency. We protect the rights of all New York City students. One of our most popular services is our helpline, which is open Monday to Thursday from 10 to 4. And we also provide free legal services to low-income families. We have a lot of guides and resources on our website on many, many different topics. We have workshops and trainings like this that we're able to offer to the community. And finally, we have policy advocacy and impact litigation. Okay.
All right, I'm going to take over from Kim for a little bit, and I'm going to talk about the law for students with disabilities. And I know that this presentation today is geared towards children born in 2021 and the kindergarten IEP process, but this is just going to cover the law for students with disabilities comprehensively in New York City public schools. The Individuals with Disability Education Act says that all children through age 21 with a disability have the right to a free and appropriate public education. Sometimes you'll hear this acronym called FAPE, and they have the right to a free, appropriate public education in the least restrictive environment. So these are kind of the two prongs of the law for students with disabilities. So what this means is that students who uh, attend public schools have the right to uh, an appropriate public education, meaning that they will make meaningful and appropriate progress in light of their circumstances and their disability. And then the second part of this, the least restrictive environment, this means that to the best of their ability, students will learn with peers who don't have disabilities to the best of their disability, to the best of their abilities. So like I said before, this varies student to student. For some students, this might mean uh, learning in a general ed classroom. For others, the least restrictive environment still could be, a self-contained class, for example. Okay, a question here, based on your previous knowledge and based on the little bit I shared from the last slide. An appropriate education means that one that allows a student to A, reach their full potential, B, make meaningful progress, C, make at least some progress, or D, attend their local school. Okay, so we're getting a few answers in. We can um, wait about 20 to 30 more seconds for a few more answers, and then we'll go over this one. All right, for the sake of time, yeah, we might end the poll and go forward. So the only answer we got in this poll was answer A, which is reach their full potential. Well, that is certainly a goal for all of our children. In this context, an appropriate education means one that allows a student to make meaningful progress. So, meaningful progress means to excel or to advance in light of their circumstances throughout the year. And this is what's reflected in an IEP, which we'll discuss later. Um, so what is an IEP? I've used the acronym already a few times, but an IEP is an individualized education program. Um, so the most important part of the IEP is this first part, that it's individualized. It's for each student. So we're going to talk about classifications shortly, but for example, I could have the same classifications as a friend of mine, but our IEPs might look completely different um, because they're meant to be individualized. They're meant to be tailored to our specific needs um, and what we need as learners. They're created at the meeting collaboratively by parents and professionals. Um, IEPs are reviewed annually. Um, and importantly, they're legally binding. So this means that everything on an IEP and everything that's written there must be included throughout the year in which the IEP is in effect. And this is important because it gives you recourse and options to get services if your child is not getting services that they should on their IEP. Um, so again, it's important that this is an individualized document and that it's legally binding and everything on it must be provided to the student. Okay. Um, so preparing for the IEP. Um, so the DOE's role, the DOE will send you a mailing with information and list of kindergarten orientation meetings in the fall. If you did not get this mailing, work with the preschool staff to make sure that the CPSC has your correct address so you don't miss any future mailings. The DOE will send you a notice of referral. Many families will receive this letter starting in January. Each child's transition is assigned to a DOE representative, usually a school psychologist or social worker, working at a school or at a CSE regional office. Most commonly, the representative is a psychologist at your zone school. The notice of referral will inform you which school or CSE office will be responsible for working with you to develop your child's kindergarten IEP. This will also include what evaluations the DOE expects to conduct. The DOE representatives assigned will review your child's preschool IEP and progress reports and decide whether or not to do the classroom observation and any other assessments. You'll receive notice of whether or not new assessments are needed, and the DOE will schedule IEP meetings between February and May. Your child's preschool's role is to prepare progress reports and submit them to the DOE to assist you, the family, um, about what could be a good fit for kindergarten as far as the placement is concerned, and then also to attend the IEP meeting. The parent's role is to learn all you can about this process. So being here today is a great first step. Check my school's directory and or contact schools to schedule tours, ask about different types of classes, speak with your current teacher and providers, review progress reports, evaluations, to help assess what type of class and services will be appropriate for your child for kindergarten. Not all children need new evaluations before the IEP meeting. That said, you can request evaluations if needed or wanted from the DOE by writing a letter to the DOE representative in charge of your child's transition. You can also obtain private evaluations if you need them or want them. Keep in mind that some evaluations and assessments are currently being done remotely. A DOE rep may join your child's Google Classroom or Zoom lesson to observe them on screen. If your child has medical needs or will need special transportation accommodations, get medical forms completed by the doctor. They're available on the DOE's website, and your preschool should be able to help you get a copy. And importantly, make a list of everything you want to request at the IEP meeting. Think about who should come to the IEP meeting and come to the IEP meeting prepared. So I know that's a lot of information. Again, this will be recorded and shared with you all. But this is just an overview of the DOE's role, the preschool's role, and your role in the process. And I guess just a note here is we use DOE interchangeably with New York City Public Schools. So when we say DOE, we are talking about New York City Public Schools. Okay. Um, we have a pause here for questions, though I think we have the Q&A function in the chat. So as they come up, we encourage you to just send them along. And we have one of our colleagues, Liliana, who's monitoring the chat and will hopefully answer questions or kick them to me and Kim as they come up.
No questions so far.
Okay, so the IEP meeting. Who is at the meeting? So parents, obviously, the special education teacher, general education teacher, school psychologist, district representative, and then other people. Um, so I can talk a little bit about each role here. Um, the psychologist is in charge of interpreting evaluations and helping determine the appropriate setting for a student. Sometimes a school psychologist and district representative might be the same person, just because often in the DOE, a lot of the school psychologists see work across several schools. So they might be playing both roles, and they might be the person who's aware of the services that the district offers, while also being the person who evaluates the or explains evaluations and helps make recommendations. Um, if your child is in a general education placement, then or it's being considered for the child in a general education, uh, the general ed pre-K teacher should be present. And then other people can join. So this could be a parent advocate, an interpreter. These meetings should happen in your first language. Um, and the DOE doctor, if requested in advance, can participate, or any other outside providers that support your child with their disability. Okay. Uh, Based on what we just shared, who is not a required member of the IEP team? Okay. Few answers. All right, maybe we'll do 10 more seconds or so and then we'll share results just so I can pass it back to Kim. Um, all right, I'll send it over and share results. So, yep, it looks like everyone got it. Kim, do you want to take it away here?
Yep, no problem. Um, Oh, I'm trying to stop sharing. Okay, so when you get an IEP in school age or kindergarten, you get a classification for the first time. Classification and disability are related, but they're two different things. So obviously, an autistic student has autism that is the same, but a student who has ADHD, that's not listed here as a classification, for example, even though it's a really common disability. And they would be listed under learning disability or maybe other health impairment. It really depends on what's going on with them. On an IEP in New York State, you can only have one classification, but it doesn't mean many students have more than one disability or one thing that they're struggling with during school. So, you could have a student who has an orthopedic impairment, but also has a learning disability. You would pick whichever one seems to be impacting them the most in the school environment as the classification, and then describe the other in the section of the IEPs. So classification should not determine what kind of program a student gets. The one exception to that is for students that go to state-approved non-public schools. Those schools can only accept students with certain classifications. But then, even then, sometimes an IEP could be changed to reflect the right classification if the team decided this was the best place for a student. Okay, next slide. Important sections of an IEP, if you're new to an IEP, especially the first few times you read it as a parent, it's a lot to absorb. It's many, many pages. We can't tell you what page number something are on because it's an online form. So depending on what boxes you check, the form gets bigger. If you check fewer boxes, the form is smaller. But there are different sections in each that cover different things in an IEP. We do have another presentation on our website that goes page by page showing you sections of an IEP and describing what it means, because unfortunately it's not all obvious. But the first section, it means what it should be there, that it's present levels of performance. That's supposed to be a section that discusses how a student is doing, also discusses what standardized tests were done, meaning an evaluation that was done, what's going on with the student in general in school, what their behavior is like, what their management needs are, all of that. Then there's annual goals, which is another obviously important section to look at, what a student is working on. Probably the section that when I'm reviewing IEPs for parents, I flip to find this part is the recommended program. And that's where you get into the substance of what the IEP is recommending, whether it's an integrated co-teaching or ICT classroom or a small class in District 75, for example. You'll find that in the recommended program pages. Also in those pages are related services and supports. And throughout the sections earlier, there's a section for parent concerns. That's a really important section if you're worried and you're having a disagreement with a team to make sure that they include your concerns in the IEP. And that's something you can ask for. You can make a written statement. Typically, it's something where they're creating the IEP, at least in part, in the meeting. My advice is always sit next to the person. If there's one person with a computer, sit next to them and try to see what they're looking at, and try to get your feedback in as a parent and make sure you understand what's on there. You do have a right to a copy of an IEP, and it's important to get that and to ask for any changes that you think are needed to reflect what was discussed at the meeting. Okay, next slide. The continuum of services. So this is going in order from least restrictive to most restrictive, or more restrictive, I should say. So disabled students can have an IEP with general education with support services. So you could be in gen ed, not needing any kind of special class program, but having some related services, or tutoring called SETs on the side. You also could be in an ICT, which is general education students and special education students, and combined instruction. More restrictive from that is special class in a non-specialized school, meaning a District 1 through 32 school or a community school. And those classrooms in kindergarten are a 12 to 1 to 1, which the first number is for students and the second number is for a teacher. And then the +1 is for an aide. So that's supposed to be a classroom that's for students who have attentional or behavioral issues that they need some more support in class. And then the 12 to 1 is a small class, but just with one teacher. Next slide. Okay, so getting a little bit more restrictive, there's District 75, which in those schools, sometimes they're located in a building with students that don't have disabilities, but within that District 75 school itself, and that a school is different than a building, right? My son went to a school that had 3 different schools in the building, and so that's something to, keep track of. But a specialized class in a specialized school means all students with disabilities, the ratios are a little different. The one ratio that's the same is the 12 to 1 + 1. And how you can find this on IEP is you have to click past the program services page to where it says location. And there you will see either a special class in a non-specialized school or a special class in a specialized school. If it says specialized school, that should be District 75. other classroom ratios like 8:1+1 or 6:1+1 or 12:1+4 automatically mean District 75. Um, Another more supportive program is a state-approved non-public school. And so I mentioned those briefly before with continuums, but that might be a school where, they only work with students with a particular kind of learning disability, or they only work with autistic students, and that's their specialty. So if that gets recommended on your IEP, even though it's a private school, you don't have to go to hearing. If it's an approved private school that is recommended on your IEP, your student can go there. There's also residential placement, and that's obviously pretty restrictive because the student is going away from home. And then finally, the most restrictive is home instruction, where a teacher is coming out for a limited amount of time every day. You should be affiliated with the local school and to work on schoolwork with a student who's unable to attend school. Home instruction, sometimes people get it confused with homeschooling. Home instruction is different. The DOE is still or the New York City public schools are still responsible for your child's education, but they've decided, and you've decided, that your child can't go to school, that there is no appropriate school that could meet their needs, and then they're getting instruction at home. Okay, next slide. Okay, trivia. If your child's preschool IEP recommends a special class, then the DOE must recommend a District 75 kindergarten placement. Is that you only have two choices for this one, so 50% chance, true or false? And we don't know who answered which, so don't be shy. Just take a guess. It's always interesting. All right, I'll do the Ross method of 10 seconds. And we will end it. And it's about 1/3 said true and 2/3 said false. I think that's really interesting. The correct answer is false, because it says it must recommend it. Whether or not it should recommend it is a different thing. And so, you might have a really good case for a small class if your child needed one in preschool. On the other hand, students do change a lot between 2 and 3 and 4 and 5. So it depends on the student. And certainly it's not something where you need to be in a small class if you are one in preschool. And just keep in mind, my one thing I always say with IEPs is, if you remember nothing else, remember the I stands for individualized. So it really depends, what is your child's disability and what do they need? And that's what you need to be arguing for. It doesn't mean just because they had this in preschool or they didn't have this in preschool that they need to get something else in kindergarten. They need what they need to learn in kindergarten, and you want to have as much proof as you can for that. But remember, it should be individualized to your child's needs. Okay, next slide. Thank you. Speaking of individualized to your child's needs, one thing that I think the DOE started recognizing is that although that is the ideal in practice, it's a little bit tricky to figure out how do you provide every child with what they need at every school. And they started coming up with some specialized programs, which I think many parents are really happy with if it's the right fit. And it also means that these are classrooms that are provided outside of the general application process. So for District 1 through 32 schools, you're applying through sort of a lottery or matching type process. But if, for example, you have an autistic child with an IEP who needs a program specifically to address their needs, they might be appropriate for one of the ASD, that stands for Autism Spectrum Disorder, NEST or Horizon programs. The NEST programs were one of the first specialized programs, and they were super popular. I would say they were harder to get into than some of the non-public schools, because for the right child, they could be a great fit. They were for autistic students that had higher support needs, but also were really able to engage with grade level curriculum. And so finding the right support, so teachers that were specially trained, and environments that recognized what those students needed and were able to provide it made a big difference. Other programs are AIMS that provides more ABA type of a program. ACEs is a program for students with intellectual disabilities, particularly students that are social and really benefit from being included in a typical school building, but need specialized support. iRead is a relatively new program for students with learning disabilities, reading disorders. PATH is also relatively new program for students with behavioral issues. And finally, bilingual ICT or barrier free, we put these here. They're a little bit different. It just means if you need a bilingual a special class, there's a limited number of bilingual schools. Similarly, if your child uses a wheelchair, for example, there's a limited number of barrier-free or accessible schools. They may need to do a specialized match for that child outside of the application process. So you certainly can still go through the application process, but there should be somebody looking at that application, and there's an email you can reach out to try to make sure your child gets a match that works. Okay. Next slide. Okay, questions. I want to take a sip of water.
No open questions.
Okay, thank you, Liliana. All right, so next slide. So supports and services. Obviously, I just spent a lot of time talking about the program, and that's really important. But keep in mind that the wraparound supports and services, which you should be able to get in any program, can make different programs work. So assistive technology, for example, is something that can help a student. For my son, for example, he was able to get assistive technology that had online books where they could be read out loud to him through a program called Bookshare, where he could download books and the text would be highlighted. He has a processing disorder that was huge. It made a big difference for him, and it enabled him to stay in a more grade level class because he had this help outside of it. Assistive technology can be a really big gamut. So lots of different things in there, like now my son uses AAC to speak. It's something that, depending on other students will use a PEX board in terms of communicating by pointing to pictures. Paraprofessionals are another, support that students can use. You can have a paraprofessional to help with mobility. You can have a paraprofessional to help with behavior or with lots of different things, with focusing. So people get paras for lots of different reasons. Counseling to help students with emotional regulation, nursing for medical needs, OTPT speech, you hear these a lot. If you're new to the special ed world, I apologize. It is so filled with acronyms. Eventually you get to learn this language, but it's a lot when you're first starting. So occupational therapy, which is more fine motor and navigating, the daily life. Physical therapy, which is more gross motor, like, running, walking, things like that. Speech therapy, which actually does sometimes sort of overlap into reading and other things, but also can mean, helping students articulate. Special education teacher support services, or SETS, is individualized or group tutoring based on a student's needs. A behavior intervention plan is something, so if a student has certain things that tend to make them have a hard time with emotional regulation, a behavior intervention plan can look at what are the things that might trigger a student and how to address it. And specialized transportation, this is really key for many students, especially if you're being sent to more of a specialized program. Busing can be really tricky to navigate, and you may need accommodations for that. There's a whole process for getting each of these, and we have different trainings online about them. But as you're navigating the kindergarten IEP process, something to keep in mind is asking about any of these that you think might be a good fit for your child and might help, and seeing if you can weave them into the IEP. And you can get these in any school setting. Okay, Next slide. So monitoring your mail, this is really important. In the fall, you should have already gotten a welcome packet. In kindergarten, it's the one time it's all color coded, which is beautiful. It's yellow for your welcome packet. You'll get a notice of referral for your kindergarten IEP meeting. I don't know if that's blue actually, or if this is just the color. But the notice of case reassignment is pink. And that's only if a case is reassigned, like if it was sent to a school and then they want to send it to the CSE or a different school. The prior written notice and IEP, that's white. You're going to get that after the IEP meeting. Really important to read that. Make sure it matches what you think happened at the meeting. If you have any questions or any disagreements, act quickly and let them know. Um, one of the most important pieces is the school location letter. That's green. You should get it by June 15th for a kindergarten placement in the fall. And that's going to say where they're recommending that your child go to school. Important to look at that and make sure you agree with it. Try to visit the school. Specialized program acceptance is purple. So you should get both a school location letter and a specialized program acceptance if that happened. Okay, and I can see somebody asked about prior written notice. It's a legally required document. It's kind of like a summary sheet of the IEP, but really light. It basically will just say, like, let's say your child was recommended for an ICT with speech. It's not going to say your child is recommended to PS123, it's going to say your child was recommended for an ICT in speech. The classification was X. It's something that's legally required that anytime they make a decision about a change or about something that is requested. So, certainly before a kindergarten placement or IEP, or when they're issuing it, they need to issue this on top. There's a lot of forms, and I will say they all seem to be the kind of forms that make you not want to read them. Little print, lots of jargon, but you have to sort of push past that and read them because the information in there is really important for what your child gets. Okay, next slide. Yep, and I forgot that the next slide was it. That's a lot easier. I should have just remembered that. So this is what it looks like, proving my point of, I don't know how many of us, if we did a poll, does this make you want to read this? It's a lot, right? But it has your child's date of birth. It has a description. Um, Sometimes it doesn't say a whole lot, but it will tell you what was recommended, and it will tell you what they looked at. So that's important to look at. Um, the first one is just the type of program. The second one, the green one, you can see it has the orange box. That's the one that you really want to look at because well, you want to look at them both, but that second one is telling you where they're recommending you to go to school. So in this case, the student was matched with PS 117. And that's an important, you're immediately going to want to look up that school if you hadn't heard of it before. Okay. Next slide. Thank you. So if you're not getting information, and we do get this every year where somebody reached out and said, my child's not in school, and the DOE thinks they sent something, but something happened with the mail, or they left off the apartment number, or you moved and you thought you would put in, or you had put in your address, but it didn't somehow make it through. If you're not getting mail, reach out. It's okay. This is a time when you really do want to be reaching out and making sure that everything is going through the process. Um, so it's important. And in fact, when you're new to this process for special education, I would say get used to that because it's something that for your child's school career, you're going to be reaching out a lot to make sure they get what they need. So you want to contact your CPSE administrator, contact your child's preschool because they have contacts at the DOE. After February 15th, which I guess it already is, actually contact the kindergarten IEP process. Um, and if you want to request documents by email, share your email and consent. create a New York City Schools account. If you can manage that, that's really good to get. You'll get a code. It will give you information. You can click around and see things. They're always adding more information on that. They also call it NICSA, another abbreviation to learn. And also ask your DOE representative. Okay, next slide. Language access rights, translation and interpretation. This is obviously really important. This process is super confusing. Even for people who speak English. And if you speak another language as your primary language, it makes it even more complicated. And one thing to know is that you have a right to receive translation and interpretation in all of these languages. And you can get help in your language, even if it's not listed here. But for these languages, you have a right to get it in your language. So you want to ask for that early. Keep asking if you're not getting it. And that way you can get the IEPs and the prior written notice and the school location letters, all those things you can get translated. I think the evaluations are also really important. And if you have any concerns or complaints, reach out. There's a central number there. And we will send this PowerPoint, but there's also a hyperlink here to file a complaint if you're not getting something translated or you're not getting interpretation. Supposed to be a professional interpreter. They're not supposed to just pull, your older child in to interpret for you. That's not what this means. Okay, any questions?
Nothing
Looks like
open.
no. Okay. All right. So the dates. Um, well, hopefully you already applied to kindergarten and you should be applying, you would have applied through My Schools. If you didn't, you can still visit a family welcome center. And you can also apply in your preferred language. Okay, so trivia. You should apply to schools after the DOE holds your child's kindergarten IEP meeting. True or false? Hopefully the last slide gave you a clue and the order of this training. But good job, the person who answered this so far. All right, we will end it. But good job to the person who said false. Although these are obviously very related, what kind of program your child is going to get and where your child is going to get it, they are two different processes. So you will have already done the kindergarten application process. Now you're holding the IEP meeting. You'll get your placement later. And so they're connected, but they are different. Okay, next slide. So the IEP and placement, I guess that's what I just said. There's the kindergarten admissions process, and then you have your kindergarten IEP meeting, and that should equal a school location letter. You definitely want to confirm that the school location letter is for a program that can provide the IEP services and program. And you might be thinking to yourself, well, of course, why would they recommend it if they couldn't do it? But you would be surprised at how often that can happen. And although your child has a right to what's on their IEP, the idea of the DOE, the ideal, I should say, is that all students' needs can be met in a wide variety of schools and in their neighborhood. It's not always what happens in reality. And I feel like it's one of those situations that you want to find out if there's a problem early. And so it's important to ask and make sure. Okay, next slide. So let's say there is a problem. These are the people you can reach out to. Either, you didn't get an IEP, you disagree with the IEP, you're worried about the school location letter. You can reach out to your DOE representative. You can reach out to the DOE Special Education Office, and this is the central office. Certainly you can copy kindergarten at afcnyc.org. It doesn't mean we're necessarily going to be able to help with your case, but we will monitor all the problems that come up and, can reach out if there's something that we see we can help with. You also can reach out to the Office of Student Enrollment. And finally, if none of those things are working, you do have due process rights, meaning you have a right to file for mediation, file an impartial hearing, or file a formal complaint. We have different trainings and guides on those different issues, so we're not going to go into that now, but just keep that in mind. Special education resources. We do have a transition to kindergarten guide and transition to kindergarten fact sheet. And the DOE also has a kindergarten special ed guide, District 75, and more information on specialized programs. Okay. And there are orientation meetings that for the kindergarten that I guess have already passed at this point. But you can look at recorded sessions as well. And application resources, we do have an applying to kindergarten guide, and the DOE has other resources as well, and it explains how likely your child is to get a seat and how this process works. And I would say that their resources on this have gotten a lot better, so that's the good part. The bad part is it's still a pretty complex process, but there's more and more information out about how to navigate it. Okay, next slide. Okay, so that's it. If you have any questions, feel free to throw them in the Q&A or let us know if you'd like to speak. If you can take our exit survey, it helps us a lot. So please do take it. Our funders ask for this information. It also helps us improve our trainings. So please let us know. And we do read everything. So if there's something that was not helpful, let us know. If there's something that you'd like us to do a training on specifically, let us know. And please come back to another training. We have lots of them, and we're here to try to help you as you navigate this process. All right, so we'll leave the poll up for a bit and we'll leave the Q&A open for a few minutes. Thanks, everyone.